and welcome to another episode of Home and Away, a podcast about all things in and around the world of sport in Kansas City soccer. I am Drew Vanderplug, and I am not joined this week by my good friend Cody Welton. Unfortunately, he had some scheduling conflicts, but like Kerry Zavagnin in the second half of every game, I made a tactical switch and went to the bench and got Daniel Sperry from the Kansas City Star to join me this week. So, Daniel, thank you for stepping in for Cody this week.
Yeah, no problem, man. Thanks for having me on, as always.
You bet. I think, just to kick things off, Sporting Kansas City obviously, played in Vancouver this weekend for several weeks. Cody and I have been discussing the fact that they had been getting some positive results that may or may not have been sustainable, and that once the schedule started to go the way that it has over the last several weeks, that things might become a little difficult, and it has. They've got now 1 point from the last 3 games. Vancouver, the match in Vancouver, I think statistically doesn't look quite as bad as maybe it did on the eye test. They did create a lot of opportunities towards the end of the game that sort of evened out what was a fairly lopsided match until that point. Mm-hmm. But I think something that Cody and I have discussed for several weeks now, we've gone into kind of our conversation around the strength of the roster. How good is it really? What tools legitimately does Kerry have to play with as far as how he can make this team, build some levels of success. And we have spent a lot of time just sort of talking about just the fact that the depth of the roster isn't very good. The quality of the depth of the roster isn't very good. And it's just, they're doing yeoman's work with, sort of limited ingredients. And one of the things that that we've talked about a lot is sort of soccer IQ. That's where we've noticed that there's just been a missing component. They don't anticipate play well enough. They're reacting to plays instead of anticipating. And I think that was the most clear sort of example of it in Vancouver, because Vancouver is a team that plays exceptionally fast. And you could see a team in Sporting that is just not equipped to play at that pace. And the modern game has changed so much in this direction, where a lot of teams are not just moving the ball quickly, but also making pressing decisions quickly. They're just the game moves at a much higher pace than it has in the past. And this roster is built for a version of the game that's about 5 years old. And that sort of looked like it in Vancouver. So I don't know what your thoughts are, but I felt like in every phase of the game, they just sort of seemed second to everything. And that was kind of what enabled Vancouver to sort of put their will on them in this game.
Yeah, and I think you're talking to, of course, there's a midfield, right? That I think the actions of chance creation were predictable. They're not going to ask Zoran Basong to be threading the needle in between the lines. They're not, or maybe they will, but they know he's probably not going to be able to do that. Same with Verdoya. We're probably the 2 most forward midfielders. So where's your chance creation coming? Well, it's coming with chances and balls up to your wingers or your striker. And I think the game was predictable for Sporting in that sense, without Munoz, without Memo in there, without any sort of true creative, active midfield hub. And then you're right. When you look at the way this team is without the ball, they are reacting to everything and not dictating where the ball is going, either with their pressing movements or the looks that they're giving teams. Are they forcing themselves into plays where you said they can anticipate, they can predict what's happening? I think a very clear example of a team who does this great is the Kansas City Current. They, without the ball, they're in control of every action of the game by how they press, when they choose to press, and how they move, what they allow teams to do and don't allow teams to do, and where they maybe with some fake pressing actions force the ball to go a certain way so they can actually lay a trap. I mean, those are things that team does and is drilled to do, and they have the soccer IQ and I think the coaching staff that can prepare teams to do that and to play like that. And I don't want Kerry or Roger or Ash or any of the other people on the staff necessarily to take offense to this, but this team really is, when you look at it, is set up, like you said, it's still set up to play Peter Vermes ball, which, as we have seen, the tactics are a little outdated for where the modern game is. The modern game is transitional. The modern game is quick. And so you find in games, and I'm sure we'll definitely talk about it, their ability to tactical switch they, all of a sudden, some of those tactical switches are a little bit more modern ideas of how to play the game and quirky ways to create that. So the question is, why don't they start that way? Because I think the times they do have it, and I think the players look comfortable in those modes, but they are still kind of in this, coming out in this 4-3-3, the single defensive number six, and it looks the same, and the results are the same. And so I think, like you said, this Vancouver game was just showed how little speed they really have in the midfield and in the wing. I think a guy like Zoran is very fast. Bartlett's not that fast, but he's not a guy like Radoya in the position that they put him in, more advanced in the midfield. Well, guess what? He doesn't have the legs to be a box-to-box guy as well. So you're looking at a slow midfield, slow outside backs that they put out there, and I think it showed, the roster and the limitations that Kerry's working with as a whole.
Especially as we see more and more teams play the way Vancouver is playing in MLS, right? I think, they're using a blueprint that's very familiar to people that watch Columbus. San Diego plays extremely quickly, both with their in and out, with and without the ball. That's who they're going to be facing here in about 10 days. So, these are teams that are intentionally playing a way that puts you under pressure and makes you make decisions quickly. And
Also, I'm going to say this real quick. Sporting's version of playing quick is playing a long ball, and that's not what we're talking about, and that's not what the modern game has set up to be.
I think it's a capability of pulse camps that they're trying to maximize, and I also think doing the things like San Diego's doing, where they're trying to invite pressure with possession, is just not something these players are equipped to do. They don't have the off ball movement, and I don't like you. You sort of highlighted the speed issue, and I think there's an athleticism part of this.
Yeah,
but there's also just an ability to play passes quickly.
Yeah,
right, like to. Both in the off-ball movement to allow the angle for the pass to be played one touch into space to break pressure movements, but also the ability to not take a touch, look up, find a pass, and then hit it. Those are the kinds of things that we see the better teams in the league very, very successful at. Sporting sometimes pulls off movements like that, but they'll get 1, 2, 3 passes and then the next one dies, right? They never get it to where that is actually leading them into an odd man sort of attacking movement. It's more that they get sort of towards zone 14 and then they have to start recycling again, or somebody misses a touch or something like that. And it has to be too perfect for them to accomplish it. And I think, like, to your point, the roster is built to have a very ball dominant sort of possession model, and they don't necessarily have the guys that can hit the passes necessary to make that work. Yeah. So it's like, I think Kerry's doing what he can with it, but I think your point is very valid. Cody actually did send me a text prior to us recording, and he's like, I think a conversation that needs to be had is sort of the two Kerrys, right? The guy who comes up with the lineup, the initial game plan, and just sort of like the pregame planning. That so the guy that puts the lineup together, puts together the formation, the ideas that they have, all of those things, which is very sort of Peter Vermes-esque still. And then the pragmatist that sees what's not working in game and makes an immediate adjustment and fixes the problem.
Yeah.
And that's the guy we like. We're kind of for that. I'll caveat all that by saying that game state plays a huge part in why some of these comebacks are happening. This is something we've discussed. It's something you've discussed on Shades of Blue. Like, this team, part of the reason that they're able to create so many chances in the second half is because they're down and their opponent is not really trying that hard at that point. They're just trying to secure a result. But the other part is they are making significant changes. So what is your kind of take on that? Because I know you had some questions for Kerry at the end of this one, both kind of why the formation isn't used from jump, right? Why the 3-back setup with Bartlett much more reserved and playing passes from much deeper. Along with getting Munoz on the field. Like, these changes are working. Why aren't we starting with them?
Yeah, and I think that's the hard part too. Is like he talks about very much about wanting to be a balanced team, and I think a balanced team probably doesn't change who they are all the time. But I also don't know that this team, as a team, in terms of the quality that they have the ability to just say, "Hey, this is how we want to play. This is how we got to go." This is a team that has to figure out a way to play to get results, because the player makeup probably isn't a way that you can sit there and say, "This is the identity of who we are, and this is how we're going to do it." And I think that kind of plays into that a little bit. The other thing I think is like when you have a young player like Bartlett, you want to like give him opportunities to show that he's learned. Maybe he can be a more single six if he's picked up on some of the things that he's being told, or if he's able to do more. Like, there's been a couple of games where he started out and he wasn't great as the singular six, and they drop him back into the back three. Okay, well, that's working and that's how to solve the issue. But for the long term development of Jacob Bartlett, fixing the issue and being the better six, where you don't have to get dropped into the back line to play out of a back three, is probably the player growth ascension that you would hope or want and see. And I think if you don't give them opportunities to do that, they won't hit that point too. So I think there's a mix that maybe he might be stuck in there a little bit. And I know, he talked in his answer to me about risk, and talking about how I think he doesn't, because of the way this team defends, like I think they acknowledge, and it's pretty well known that this team is not a very good defensive team at all, right? So then you're acknowledging that, and you say we're going to take a very high risk situation where we can open ourselves up to counterattacks, and we might be slower, a little bit longer in the tooth defensively. That's not able to kind of cover that ground if we get counterattacked, and so we're not willing to open ourselves up to that at the beginning of the game, which would be higher pressing and all that kind of stuff. My thought would be to start out risky, maybe bag a goal, and then sit off a little bit, and then go back to it. Like, it's those ebbs and flows. I mean, the Current do that too, and kind of how they will jump on a team for the first 15 minutes, lull you to sleep until the 35th minute, and then absolutely try and crush you before halftime. And I think there's some, again, it kind of comes down to this like whole, how can you manage a game when you don't have the ball? And when you do have the ball, how can you not give away the ball when you're in wide open situations? And that three-back system creates a lot of situations where they're wide open defensively, where there might be two center backs back and one six that's maybe kind of in somewhere in between the half circle, and the penalty area, and everyone else is in wide spaces and split out into the half spaces, and they lose the ball there, goal. Like we saw that for chances with Vancouver. We've seen it for chances at other points when they've gone open like that, as well. So I think it's one of those. I'm not necessarily defending him, but I think for that's my understanding of like maybe why we're at this spot. And he's talked about this kind of risk management, but I think he acknowledged too in his answer to me about it that at some point where they're at, they have to really start taking risks because they're not picking up the points. And sooner or later, I would love to see them try this.
I mean, being risk averse isn't stopping them from giving up chances. Like
Correct.
so from a pragmatic perspective, like I understand what you're saying. I understand that he believes that, but they give up like 2.5 plus XG per game, no
Yep.
matter what they do.
Yep.
And I would also probably counter his perception of things by saying that one of the main issues that I find they have when they play in a back four is they do not have fullbacks who track back defensively very well.
No.
So what's the fucking point of supposedly playing narrow and forcing for like that's what they do in the 4-3-3. They're playing extremely narrow. They're trying to push everything out wide and then use the sideline. The
Yep.
problem is Logan Ndembe is effectively a wing back in a back four. He is so high all the time that there's tons of space on the left side, and Joaquin Fernandez is not adept at covering that space on his own.
Nope.
And Andrew Brody, when Kyrie Shelton is injured, doesn't have the ability to track back very well unless you keep him back there, right? And so like this, they're defending these wide attacks like Jaden Nelson had over and over and over again in the first half of this game with Jansen Miller. Like he's out there by himself doing it. Whereas if they have those three guys back there, you can split those center backs wide and allow them to go press those things and create delay in the transition event so that your midfielders can get back and participate. So like I understand that may be how he's thinking about it, but it is not functioning in that way. No. And so I sort of whereas when they did pull Bartlett back, and a lot of times Bartlett was 5 yards behind the other two center backs.
Yeah.
And really just like getting on the ball from Pulskamp. And I was reminded of when Gianluca Busio played the 6 when Ilie was sort of stuck in Spain and they didn't come back from Spain for a little bit and then had to play center back when he did, right? Yeah. Busio, when he moved back to that position and started getting on the ball a lot earlier and having more of the field in front of him, he was hitting much more useful passes than he was when he was playing as an 8. Yeah. He was able, because he wasn't in that really compressed sort of pressure zone, he had enough space in front of him to start reading passes and hitting them. And I think that if we're talking about Bartlett's evolution, giving him a little bit more time to read what's going on may not be the worst thing in the world, because I'm right now not looking at him as someone who I think is going to be Ilie, right? Like I don't see that player there. In fact, I see someone who's much more of a sort of space controller and much less of a defense unlocker, right? Yeah. And maybe at some point, he's only 19. Maybe at some point his passing chops come better, but he does hit a good diagonal. He does hit a set piece. We've seen him do that a few times. Like he does have the ability to hit a long ball, and he's able to pick that pass out from deeper, I think, a little bit. So that is kind of, and I've been pushing this agenda for about a month already. So like this is something that I've been thinking about a lot, and I just think, there are many reasons why so they've kind of done this twice so far, right? The second half against Charlotte and then the second half against Vancouver were the two times we've really seen them drop back into this back three man-oriented pressure, right?
Yeah.
And it's worked the couple times they've done it. I just wish that Kerry would be able to like predict, hey, this is the type of team this would work better against, and be prepared for making that switch or bring it out initially. Yeah. I think the other thing is, like we said, I think trying to do the 4-3-3 with the personnel grouping that they had was a little Vermes-ish too. We're square peg round hole in some stuff just to have the structure.
Yeah.
And that is some stuff. Now, granted, some of that is roster related, but still, I would like to see the team kind of push away from that type of mentality as well. And so that's why I was saying, like, the difference between Kerry, the sort of, I've got 4 days to plan for this team. Here's how I'm going to go about doing it, and sort of settling on the same thing they've been doing, versus Kerry in game going, okay, this ain't working. Let me throw this out and try something else. And I appreciate that the other Kerry exists, like the pragmatist exists. But I do think that it's legitimate to at least ask the question why they're not trying this up front. Like I said, there's not much point in trying to risk mitigate.
Yep.
On the road against Vancouver, like why?
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah, and I think he alluded to this at the end, and I said it earlier, but they've got to start taking more risks. And I understand the hope for balance and all that kind of stuff, but there's this team is not set up to be a balanced juggernaut, and it's going to require tinkering. It's going to require mixing and matching what you can do with what you have to what might work against an opponent, and that's how they're going to get their results. And
also looking for towards the future, like what players do you have that, and this is we'll lead this into the sort of Jake versus Nemanja Radia debate, which was very fervent on the home and away Discord during this game, but not just Jacob Bartlett, Potentially Santi Munoz. We've heard rumblings that they want to keep Munoz around as well. Like that buy option, I don't know if they have to negotiate or whatever to make it work cap wise. But he is a player that obviously has impressed since joining.
Mm-hmm.
Long term, if you're Kerry and you want this job long term, you have to start thinking about how do I use these players that I know are going to be around in an effective way. I think Jake is better in a double pivot than he is as a free eight. I think he's better as a right back, honestly, than any of those things lately. But regardless, if Jake is a central midfielder, I think he and Basong in a double pivot work best and in that way. So, like, you've got these personnel. I would assume they're going to pick up Basong's option. I mean, he's making very little. There's no reason that they wouldn't want to do that. Jake is obviously around. Bartlett obviously is going to be around. Munoz, you want to bring back next year. Why would you not look to find a way to maximize those players? Whether or not you believe Jake Davis is actually a better central midfielder than Nemanja Radia, I think we're in the margins on that, right? Like, I can understand why he made the choice for Radia, especially given how active Vancouver's midfield is and how hard they press, and having a press resistant sort of ball manager there did sort of make sense on paper, and it didn't work, but it made sense on paper.
Yeah.
Even if you believe those things are true, this is not a player you expect to return next year. So the argument in the Discord, which I sort of understand, is why aren't you prioritizing the players that you are going to return next year?
Yeah, I think one thing he talked about was, form coming back from Jake. And, we'll go back to maybe his last couple of starts and the sub appearances. If you sub in and you get 2 yellow cards within a 15, 20-minute standpoint and get a red, you're going to be in the manager's doghouse a bit.
He deserves all the doghouse he's received. I'm not making. I am not in any way saying that Jake does not deserve to be coming off the bench right now. I'm just saying, like, I also understand the argument around at some point you got to reintegrate him for the good of the team.
Yep, and I think I tend to be with you that it might actually be right back over being in the midfield just to help raise the floor there, and I put that out into the universe in the middle of the game of, like, there's no way that the floor of what Davis can bring and what we've seen. I mean, this was a playoff team that ran the table in the West in 2023 for 2/3 of the season to make the playoffs after being garbage for 10, and they did so with Jake at right back.
He never played the position in his life.
He never played the position in his life. And I think it's foolish to think that the floor of that is any worse than, Brody, who was getting torched time and time again until he got put back out into the 3-4-2-1 or 3-5-2, however you want to call whatever they tried to do after it. The 3-man back line pushed him up higher, got him closer to Jaden Nelson, and it helped a little bit. Kyrie Shelton also good and bad at times. So you're looking at the level. If you want a floor and a level of consistent play, Davis is probably better right there right now. And I understand if everybody wants him to be this midfielder that he may not be yet. And the idea of him being an 8, that the free 8, right? We would talk about that was kind of the role that he got when he's played in the 4-3-3, has not really been as a single 6. Last year, the best that Sporting played was with Zoran Basong and Jake Davis as double pivot.
That's what started the Open Cup final.
And it also
Jake Davis and Zoran Basong in central midfield.
And they kept LAFC to 1 for the entirety of regulation there. And so you look to...
Kyrie had a great game at right back, by the way, in that game. So that had something to do with it. We haven't really seen that version of him since, but he did have a great one in that game.
Yes, and I think, too, like, Jake has suffered a couple of injuries at the beginning of this year. You do want form to come in, and if he's at a point, too, if he picks up another yellow card, he does get suspended another game. So then, do you minimize how much time he's on the field? Try and get him to the 5th game in a row without a yellow card, but to knock that game off the suspension, towards the suspension. I mean, that's a rule in MLS. You can go 5. He's 1 yellow card away from getting a match suspension for 2 yellow card accumulation. He, on good behavior already this season, has got it knocked down 1. And so if he goes 5 games without a yellow card, he gets his number of yellow cards total knocked down. So do you manage how much you play him on the field to hope that he doesn't get a yellow card and suspend himself another game for the year? Maybe. I mean, there's different things kind of all at play here. But I tend to be with you that I feel like I the best that I have seen this team this season is when Jake Davis is on the field in some capacity, because the energy he brings, it in a way kind of helps others will themselves toward it. We've seen that Zoran Basong be that at times, kind of a life giver in that way. And then maybe if you put the two of them as an engine in the midfield might actually go a little bit quicker. I understand the debate. I think tactically it was maybe a decent choice. If you're going to be stuck to the 4-3-3, you want a player like Radoja out there. But it didn't work, and Radoja hasn't shown in his last few games, really, even before his injury. He was terrible in that game in St. Louis before he got taken off the field for the injury. He came on, was really not great for 5-10 minutes, and then gets taken off for the injury. And so, it's a good idea, but it just didn't quite work. And I think that's where fans and us, armchair analysts and couch coaches or so are saying, maybe why not Jake? Why not Jake? And I understand his answer, but I think at some point, like the tactical thing, at some point it's going to come to a head, and you're going to have to go with something more risky and something that is probably something different than what we've seen that's not working so far.
Right. I mean, it goes back to the tactical conversation. When you're trying to make the floor as high as possible by, giving away the ceiling a little bit, and the floor is still really low, what's the point? Like, if we're only raising the floor by half an inch when it needs to go up like a foot, what's the point? And lowering the ceiling at the same time. So, like, I think that's kind of my thing. Is like, I want that pragmatist that shows up and makes tactical adjustments in game to pragmatically look at, like, okay, risk aversion and risk maintenance notwithstanding, what gives us the best chance to actually put goals on the opponent, because we're not going to shut them out. It's not going to happen. So what gives them the best chance of scoring? And I think that there are some different ways to deploy some of these players. The other obvious question is about Santi Munoz. Now, Munoz is kind of a player without a position on this roster, right? Like, when he comes into games, he impacts them, but he is a very central player. So like he often comes in and plays with Decky, but he'll come in for a winger, and I'll see him everywhere between both vertical half channels, right? Like, he'll be across all of them. Not in the way that Eric Tommy does. Eric just he receives wide and then drives to the middle. Receives wide, drives to the middle. Like, goes into the and will try to receive the ball on top of his teammates. I do appreciate Munoz actually does understand space and will go find the pockets of space, but it could be anywhere between the left and right vertical half space that he's doing it. Which means that you've got some unbalanced sort of nature to your positioning, which can be problematic, and I understand why Kerry would be concerned about that. But also, he is a force multiplier. The team is immediately better when he's on the field. Like, everyone immediately gets better when he's on the field. And I can't say that for Shapi Suleimanov. I don't think Shapi is not significantly improving the teammates around him. He will receive the ball in space and sometimes do something with it and sometimes not. And if the defense is even the least bit aware of the fact that he only wants to go left, they're just going to drive him into pressure, and he's going to, either have to pass backward or lose the ball. Santi Munoz is a much more difficult player to defend, seems to create more problems for the defense than they really want to deal with, and seems to also create spaces for his teammates to go into. And so I know Kerry's talked about this a lot, trying to figure out how to get all these good players on the field at once. Isn't it just as simple as putting them out there and seeing what again, this goes back to this risk conversation.
I think it is. And to, like, the idea of, like, this personnel, gosh, could have been suited of playing a 4-4-2 or a 4-2-2-2 of some way, shape, or form in this Vancouver game. With the way Daniel and Shabby play, with the two strikers, they're not two giant physical strikers, but they're strikers whose movement off the ball and ability to combine and understand space with each other. I think that's one thing that Munoz understands where he needs to be in comparison to everyone else around him, and it eliminates some of those issues. He knows when he needs to tuck underneath. He knows when he needs to run off the back shoulder. He knows when he needs to be in the half space to help combine and advance the ball down the wing. There's just so much to his game that even a 4-4-1-1, something like that, would have made sense in this. And that's, again, goes back to our conversation of the initial 4-3-3 tactical rigidity, like the love of kind of throwing something out there different that, as you said, force multiplies what they have at their disposal. And I just think he does sometimes what he is Munoz, what Manu Garcia doesn't, and that's play up next and off of Decky in that way. And Munoz likes to operate a little, or Manu likes to operate a little bit deeper and ping balls around in that way. He does do good stuff when he gets in closer and plays closer with Decky, but we see it more so when Munoz is on the field. And so I think there's got to be a way for them to figure out how to get all of them in some way, shape, or form, because I think they at least have got to try something here. And they're at a point where I don't know. I think they're starting to run out of some of those options.
Yeah, I mean, this is where the 3-5-2 starts to make sense, right? Because you can play with two strikers, Manu underneath, and even some version of that where, like, in the Nancy system, where those front three sort of rotate around and it's just sort of where the pockets of space are. That does mean you sacrifice a Shallowy or a Shoppy or somebody like that. But I think at some point you have to consider, as a coach, making the difficult decision to put the most likely to create a goal scoring chance players on the field together.
Yeah.
And Kerry hasn't had an issue in the past benching Daniel for Eric Tommy.
Mm-hmm.
So why would he have an issue of doing it for Munoz, right? And similarly with Shoppy, I think Shoppy, by the way, probably could do a job at wingback. Like, I think he could. So like there are some other options of how risky you want to get. Maybe in the especially if Jake is playing in central midfield in a double pivot behind Manu, because the main issue with Manu, and I sort of adjudicated this on the Home and Away Discord when talking about it. Somebody asked me, it's like, what would Coach Drew do? And I sort of showed the 3-4-2-1 that I would like to run. Part of the issue with Manu is you can't put him in that double pivot because he is a defensive zero, right? And so they don't have the ball winner to put next to him, right? They don't have Anibal Godoy like we're going to see against San Diego in a week and a half. They don't have Gaston Brugman. They don't have a player like that who can really or Igor Jesus for LAFC. Like, there are a number of teams that have these kind of players, Obino de Bordo in Cincinnati. Like, if you can name almost any pretty good team, and they have some sort of significant ball winner. And Kansas City hasn't had that since Roger Espinosa left to become a coach. So, they can't realistically put Manu in a double pivot because of that. So you have to do some sort of structural changes. But I do think that there are ways to get some of those guys on the field. And I think Shallowy is a willing enough defender to be in the wide side of a 4-4-2 or as a wingback in a 3-4-2-1. I think there are ways to, depending on game state and how you need to use players, where you can make changes. I also think Shallowy can come in and play as one of the 10s in a 3-4-2-1, right? Like, I think that there are ways to utilize these personnel where you swap people in and out of those wide sort of attacking roles in that aren't so reliant, that don't screw up the structure so much when you do it, right? Like, I think that's the main thing that I find with this 4-3-3 is that it's so reliant on on those midfield positions being played well, and they're not being played well.
Yeah.
And you're sort of shoehorning people in, like against Seattle when they got blitzed in the first half. they were running a Memo and Zoe in a double pivot, and it
Yeah.
just didn't work, right? And part of it was availability because of Jake's red cards and stuff, but it
Hmm.
was still it. I think that there are ways to create that structure that aren't so reliant on specific individuals being available. That is my main
Yeah.
concern, right? Like I think that they're super reliant on a very specific starting lineup right now, and they haven't really had it most of the year, and then we're seeing the
Nope.
results.
Nope. I think there was a stat that was put out. I think they've played 24 games so far, and they've used 23 or 24 different lineups.
Yeah, that makes
And
sense. Yeah.
this,
What's your read on like the Shoppy stuff? Because I think Shoppy's an okay player. Like I don't, I'm not near as down on him as some people are, but I also think that he is a very sort of he is as an okay player, he is probably going to get a total of 8 to 10 goal contributions in a season,
mhm.
but also will go 4 games and do nothing,
Yeah.
right? And so like, but Kerry seems fairly reliant on starting him every game.
Hmm.
What is your read on kind of what the thought process is there? Is it defensive cover? Is it I don't know. I mean, I don't think he's that good of a defender to be a defensive cover guy. So I'm not sure
Yeah.
what the thought is there.
I'll say this. One, I don't know that you have another right wing option outside of Eric. Eric Tommy hasn't done well when he has started in the right wing
Right.
spot. His best has been at left wing or as a 10 in the midfield. So
This is where someone's going to ask about Steven Afrifa. But
yeah,
anyway,
and fair. It's the thought. However, Stephen Afrifa was also not very good on the right last year too. When he did play, he was
and he's
much
been
better on the left.
absolute garbage in the few minutes he's played this year too. So
Yep. But I think with Shoppy, he can't. He is a type of guy that if he has a half space, like his shot is good enough that if is he's not the kind of guy that's just going to drill a shot and get it blocked necessarily. And I've kind of come to appreciate that with him. He is more selective and picky. He can't really take guys one on one, but when he does have the ball, he doesn't really seem to give it away in bad situations. And I think that's one thing. Like his passing for a right winger in terms of the buildup and playing off of people is good enough and safe enough that he's not going to give the ball away. He is still going to kind of engine it for 50, 60 minutes where he'll be able to drive at teams and cut inside and maybe try and cause some problems and cut back onto his right and whip a ball across. But I just, I think there is a level of, as you said, safety, not only defensively, but like I said, I don't think he's the kind of guy that he gets in the box. He's not giving the ball away in a way that the team is wide open. And that has been such an issue for this team last year and this year is when they give up some of the highest XG in the league, and it's because they give up big chances and they give up a whole lot of odd man situations where they lose the ball in bad spaces and get either in buildup or higher up the field when they have numbers committed forward and are defensively are kind of wide open. I think he's a safe option, which they kind of just to me is maybe the reason why he's out there. I also think if the mid in this we talk about the midfield being incredibly important in the 4-3-3 in this idealistic setup, his play with the midfield and being able to play off of guys and that unlocking him either in behind or into shooting lanes, like he wants to try and do that, but that pass doesn't come from the midfield because the midfield doesn't have the ability to play that pass. And those are in the past, that's Johnny playing off of Roger. That's Johnny playing off. That's somebody like that to kind of create some of those 1-2. I'm in the wide space. I've drug a defender out. We're gonna shuttle it, and you play that split ball. And now I'm in behind you to play a square pass or take a shot. That kind of stuff can't happen. Doesn't really happen because the midfielders that midfield three doesn't have that ball playing ability. And so maybe in the 4-3-3 system, we talk about it, square peg, round hole. I just don't think that the midfield is there because he's not the kind of guy that's going to go do it on his own like Johnny could.
right.
But through the flow of things, in the ideal way that this 4-3-3 plays, he should be able to create some of his chances that way. And I would like to see him try it more. I think Jake is probably the only other midfielder that's actually going to be trying to play those little through balls that those wingers are looking for when they get into those 1-2 situations. Because right now, you play it to Rado, you play it to Jake Bartlett, those passes are either going back or sideways again. And there's nothing really cutting through the middle.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the fair assessment. I think I also thought I think Jake has played so little over the last couple months that we haven't seen him build any rapport with Shoppy and sort of learn those movements with him very well. So that might be another reason to either have Jake as the right-sided midfielder or the right back so that they can figure that kind of stuff out. I was thinking sort of in the inverse of that without having Johnny around. I think Johnny being around is also what made Jake so good at right back, and also what made Jake as good as he was when he played right midfielder last year with Johnny is that there was a rapport there and a player who just understood how to avail himself to his teammate. And I think that's the key difference, I think, between Shoppy and say, someone of Johnny Russell's quality. You said it about Munoz earlier, about knowing how to put himself in the space where his teammates can find him, as well as rotate to the space where his teammates aren't, right? Shoppy needs someone to play him into space, right?
Yeah.
If you play him into space, he will go do it. But he is not necessarily going to make the space look he's not going to show you the space that show you the pass he wants you to hit, right? Whereas Johnny was a little bit better, I think, about like moving in such a way that he made the pass look easy. And I think that what I've seen from Sporting for the most part this season is just the windows are too narrow most of the time. And so a lot of things need to go right for them to unlock that. Whereas in defense, it seems like the windows are wide enough to drive a truck through.
Yep.
And so their opponents look like peak Barcelona against them. And so this is just kind of the thing that I think that they're going to continue to battle this season. And I think, hopefully, in my opinion, I think we've reached a point where it's more about like trying to figure out the best way to give yourself the most options and the best opportunity to do good and stop trying to minimize the bad. It goes back to the old business management books and whatnot about discovering your strengths and maximizing your strengths versus trying to minimize weaknesses, because things that are weaknesses will always be weaknesses and you can only make them so good. Whereas the things you're really good at, you should be trying to, utilize to your advantage. I think that's kind of where I'm at as part of this whole conversation, is that I'd like to see Sporting and Kerry look more to try to create problems for the opponent as opposed to trying to mitigate how many problems the opponent creates for them.
Yep.
Okay, let's do potpourri real quick. We got a lot of topics on here in and around the Sporting against the MLS soccer sphere. I don't think we need to go through all of them, but a lot of things happening in MLS right now, right? The secondary transfer window is open. I know everybody's hoping to hear about some great things that Sporting Kansas City is going to be doing during this window. Hopefully we'll have some news about some of those things here soon. But there's been a lot of stuff happening around the league regardless. The first one is obviously this Rodrigo de Paul thing finally gets over the line and everybody acting like Miami is subverting the rules. I spent a lot of time on this last week. I mean, and we've talked about it on the Discord a lot. I don't think it's quite as egregious as everyone makes it out to be. I just think it's a team in Miami that everyone knows and thinks and has been caught cheating in the past, so they just think that naturally, this is very much like the LA Galaxy in the early 10s, right? Like just everything they did, MLS is making a rule for them, et cetera, et cetera. I don't think that's happening, but here we are. We have it now. I do think what was funny was Lionel Messi and Jordi Alba getting suspended for the game after the All-Star break because they didn't go. And Jorge Mas getting big mad about it and acting like everyone's against them, and I'm like, I don't know if that's true either, buddy. I don't think that's what's going on. I just think it's I don't know what your take is on all of that stuff, but the fans wearing the MLS versus Miami shirts and all this stuff, and I'm like, we might have jumped the shark a little bit on this deal.
It's quite a bit far out. I mean, the rules are the rules, and I think this is something too where they could have said. Obviously, the league very clearly said, "We understand the amount of games that Messi has played. We understand all of this." What bothers me is there's this lack of, oh, is Messi not going to play? Is he going to play? Is he not going to play? Well, they could have addressed this and nipped it in the butt like Monday. They could have gotten Dayon on a plane down to Austin and had somebody else in there that could have done it. They had Bureau from Atlanta at the last, or from Austin at the last second. They didn't able to actually fill Messi's spot, and I think if they do that, maybe there's no suspension here.
This
And the
this was a
rules aren't the
completely
rules.
coordinated thing by Miami, by the way.
Oh
I
yeah,
promise you. Like
no,
everything about it, like the whole thing with Moss is a PR campaign. Like all of
it
this is
is.
they
And,
did it
and,
exactly the way they did for this exact reason.
mhm.
This is not a woe is me situation. They
Oh no.
intentionally waited to the last minute and put MLS in this thing. And candidly, any other, like if I'm FC Cincinnati, I'm lobbying hard for them to be suspended because I sent two of my guys to that game, and I think Miles Robinson played like a whole half. Like
Yep.
so, I'm
Yeah.
not. I'm pushing
Yeah.
hard, and I think other owners would have been pissed if they
Yeah.
were like, "Oh, we sent our guys to this game, and now you didn't, and you got away with it." Like, no way.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think for me that's just how you look at it here. Suspension had to happen, and for Jorge Mas, I think it's a brilliant play by him to show, okay, if you're going to spend my guy, I'm going to come out and I'm going to rant and rail against you and shake my fist, angry shake fist at cloud kind of a thing, and make it look like I'm defending my guy because ultimately we're still trying to keep him and I'm trying to make that negotiation good. So I think it was well played by everybody,
Right.
because MLS gets to look like they don't show favoritism to Messi for a second, and Jorge Mas gets to rant and rail and defend his guy. And I wouldn't even be surprised if they said, "Sure, go ahead and do that, Jorge Mas,"
Yeah.
because that's just how this goes. It created a ton of buzz about a game that nobody was really going to watch, and people were almost like hate watching it to watch Cincinnati beat Miami or see what happened. And you've got Messi fans watching it because they want to see Miami beat Cincinnati, and it worked out perfect for all
Yeah. While
parties.
Leo sits in his suite drinking mate and watching the game.
Hmm.
Exactly.
Yep, and his new pal Rodrigo De Paul.
Exactly. Who has apparently already got his visa and is available to play tonight against
Yep.
Atlas in Leagues Cup.
Hmm.
So, before we get to Leagues Cup, the other hot stovey things that kind of went around, the Thomas Muller to Vancouver thing was kind of interesting. It's another one of these MLS mechanisms getting brought out into the light, and FC Cincinnati holding his discovery rights for ransom and getting 400,000 in GAM out of it. I mean, good on them for doing it, but again, it just shows some of the sort of draconian rules that exist in this league and that are kind of dumb.
Absolutely silly.
But I think Thomas Muller in Vancouver is going to be kind of cool, especially if they can get Ryan Gauld healthy. Like that team's going to be kind of fun, I think, if they can do that. He fits in what they do really well, I think. So I think
Yeah,
that that could be a very interesting kind of guy to add to that roster.
he does slow them down a little bit though.
I mean, a little bit, but he's going to be playing so
A little.
high that I'm not sure that it matters. With Berhalter and Kubas in a double pivot, who cares?
Yep.
Who cares? Like it's fine, whatever. If it's Jake Davis and Zoran Basong, you're a little bit concerned, right? But Sebastian Berhalter and Andreas Kubas, I'm fine. So a bunch of other kind of random ones. Steven Alzate from Hull City is going to Atlanta to kind of try to add to their midfield. They've moved a lot of guys out as well to kind of make space for some of these people.
Hmm.
Real Salt Lake signs like three more center forwards. I think they have like five.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
I mean,
Between Willie, between who's the other one? I'm
they had
forgetting.
another guy that they had signed as well. Yeah, I don't know.
Um,
They got it. They have all the center forwards on their
all
team
of
now.
them. LAFC's roster moves are the ones that are interesting to me. I think really like their moves, underrated, and are moves that I look at and I say, man, those would be great players to have at Sporting Kansas City.
Yeah.
But the only way they make,
Schwanier specifically would have been a
yeah,
great guy to add to this team for
yeah.
sure.
But then you look at it too, and you're like, okay, are they going to choose LAFC or are they going to choose Sporting Kansas City? Where are you choosing?
Right.
at the moment.
Chouanier was at like Grasshopper, right? Is that where he
Yeah,
was at?
he was over in Switzerland.
Yeah, did he get? I mean, they paid a transfer fee, I think, from Montreal to get him. But yeah,
Hmm.
and then Ryan Porteous from Watford as well. They needed another center back with Aaron Long's injury, so it makes sense that they make that move. So like yeah, these are really good, like solid undercover moves to like make their team better. And then if they can get Sun Hung Min, like that team's gonna be really fun,
Yeah.
like
Yep.
really really fun. Another my favorite signing of the window is the Columbus Crews, which is Wassim Abu Ali from Al Ali.
Hmm.
This is a guy, if you read Tom Bogert's article on him, that they had been chasing since January.
Hmm.
And Al Ali was like, no freaking way until after the Club World Cup. And then he gets like
Yep.
a hattie against Porto.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
Issa Tall is like quoted in there. He's like, I just put my phone away because I was like, there's no way we're going to be able to get this guy now.
Hmm.
Thankfully, Abu Ali did really appreciate Columbus's continued sort of pursuit of him and chose to go to Columbus. So I think he's going to be a huge add to that team.
Yep. They're back to the dangerous, crazy center striker with Diego Rossi next to him and everybody else.
I think
Making
Gozdog's going to
people
look
go.
better with a real striker in front of him too. Like I
Correct.
just think Gazdag has struggled with, they've been
Yeah.
using like Jason Russell Rowe, and it's just like
Who's
I
not a
think
bad striker, but
he's nah, but
he is not the force multiplier that a
right,
guy like Cucho or Abu Ali is.
exactly. Um, Other big, I mean, Matt Turner might be going back to New England. That's okay.
That whole saga is wild.
You and
Um,
I have talked about this on the Discord. There's a lot to go, there's a lot to unpack there that we don't have time to unpack now. But between Nottingham Forest, Crystal Palace, and Lyon, and all the different sort of John Texter and Woody Johnson, and there's a lot. There's a
there's
lot happening there.
a lot happening.
But anyway, it looks like his deal to Leon is probably off. They've
Hmm.
hired lawyers to stop it from happening, so he's trying to find a new
Yeah.
place. And then Timo Werner, they're still trying to sign him in New York. I don't know if that'll happen or not, but he's due to make like over 10 million euro for
Hmm.
RB Leipzig this year. So I think even a 3-year deal from the Red Bulls would only be a million or two over that. So I can understand why he'd be kind of like, man, whatever. I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
Last topic for the pod this week. The Kansas City Current are finally going to start playing some games of consequence again. The
Oh,
biggest thing that I saw from your social media feed, I think this was today that you heard this from Vlaco, that
mhm.
Dabinia might travel for this
Yeah.
one.
Yeah. Today, I asked Vlaco about it on their press conferences before match day here on Friday, and they asked him just about Dabinia and whether or not she'll be back, and he said they're after training today they'll decide whether or not if she travels to Louisville. Says she's healthy. And expects her to be back. I would, for me, I'm putting it within the next 2 weeks. I wouldn't be surprised if she's not on the plane to Louisville this week. She's certainly going to Utah to at least come off the bench and get some good time in that home game. I will say I don't think that they're a team that will err on the side of caution here. If she does travel, I'd be interested to see what game state they allow her to come in here, especially against a Louisville team that's pretty aggressive and playing at home. Bev Yanez is a good coach that has that team. While they may have some talent deficiencies, they are never up for a lack of heart, and so they're a tough team to deal with at times. And I think putting her in a spot might be a little bit too tenuous for her. Might be hard to do in this first game out, but I'd be stunned if she's not playing matches by the time that Orlando game comes back around.
Yeah, that was kind of my thought. I mean, they've got an 8-point lead over the Pride right now in the
Mhm.
standings. It doesn't seem like the right time to be,
You don't
risking
want to force
players.
something back, right?
Yeah. There's no
But it
time.
is good
No.
to know that she's healthy and she's been training in full lately. So good news.
Yeah, and Lola Bonta got some minutes in the quote unquote Teal Rising Cup.
Yep.
So, I mean, it seems like she's getting back to fitness as well, which is a good thing because it appears the Vanessa DiBernardo season is done.
Yes.
They officially announced, I guess, just a couple hours ago before we
Hmm.
started recording this, that she is pregnant, I think, with their first kid, right? So,
Yes. Yeah.
congrats to Vanessa. But that
Hmm.
also means that she will be going on the season ending injury list. And
I,
they
I,
do.
clarified this. So it's not the season ending injury list. There
Okay.
will just be a maternity leave out listing.
Okay.
So they
But they
don't.
do get the roster spot back from it, right?
Yes,
It works like a CI. Yeah, you want to be careful. You don't want to call it an injury. I'm sure there are probably like
legal.
there are
It might be
there are
legal.
probably federal regulations
Yes,
about this because
correct.
we get into FMLA and all that kind of stuff that you are
Yep.
required to provide as an employer. So I don't want to litigate all of that, but I'm sure that there are federal regulations that stop them from calling it that. But yes, she will be out on maternity leave for quite some time now
Yep.
until probably I don't know when she's due, but then you've got getting back to fitness and everything after that. That's a pretty hard thing on the body. So at any rate, getting low back in the
Hmm.
midfield is a valuable thing as we're seeing that. And then
Yeah.
the final thing before we go, big one because I think it's really important. Free agency is coming. I know you've had a conversation about like free agents, potential free agents for the current, and ones that they needed to get locked down. They got Kayla Sharples locked down till
Yeah.
2027, right? And a mutual option for 28, which I think is a huge area, a huge signing for them to keep going forward.
Well, and especially with Alana Cook. I mean, you have Alana Cook out on under contract for the next, all the way through 2028 herself. However, you don't know when she's coming back next season. That knee injury was incredibly tough, and so you want to lock down somebody who's going to be a true anchor there. And whether or not, if Gabrielle Robinson gets back into the fold, a left-footed center back, does she slip over to the left-hand side and Sharples into the right? Do they keep running E-ball and Sharples? Like those are. Do they go out and get somebody? I mean, they've got a roster spot open now that they don't even need to worry about. They've got a couple roster spots open now to bring in some names from. They've got international spots open too that they can use. So I think this is a team that could still kind of add. Their window's open through I believe near the end of August. This is. I won't be surprised if there's still another free agency signing or two from the current within their own roster, their own team. But yeah, I think Sharples for me was priority one because I think even as good as Alana Cook was when she first came in, the ability of Kayla Sharples, I put it out in the article yesterday. 23 games she has played, 12 of them have been clean sheets. That I think
And I've said
that
over and
says
over
enough.
again, shutouts are not a goalkeeping stat. Like I've
They're
said
not.
that forever. They are a defensive
Rarely
stat.
ever. Yes.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
especially
exactly.
the Casey Current shutouts
One
are
hundred
not are
percent.
not a goalkeeper stat.
Lorena is a much improved
Very,
goalkeeper from what they've had, but still,
yeah.
this a lot of it has going back to last year. A lot of this goes
Yes.
back to has to do with Kayla Sharples. So
Yep.
that is great news, and hopefully we'll see the current return to their winning ways this Friday evening.
Hmm.
And we appreciate all of you joining with us. And Daniel, thank you for stepping in for Cody this week.
No
And
problem.
hopefully we will have Cody back next week to do a little bit of a preview of the San Diego match. And until then, I'm Drew. He's Daniel. We will talk to y'all next week.
Start doing it. Start doing it. Start doing it.